make it 2 o'clock, and so I'm going to call this work session to order. The topic of the work session is the Las Cruces Utilities Energy Transition. And before we begin, I will remind us all that since this meeting is being conducted remotely, that we are under the advisory from the Attorney General's office. Even though we are not taking any votes during the meeting, when it's your turn to speak, please go ahead and identify yourself. And should the connection with the outside world be broken, I will need to suspend the operations until that connection is reestablished. We do have a quorum of the board present, and along with a large number of utility staff and 4 outside attendees. So I'm going to turn the meeting over to Director Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome board members. As Chairman Little mentioned, today we're starting with our energy transition and decarbonization work session. The purpose of this meeting is to address some city council initiatives that have been passed by city council that may impact Las Cruces utilities, both in our own efforts toward sustainability and growth, as well as affordable energy and affordable utilities to our citizens and our ratepayers. So what we're going to do today is I will go through the initiatives that have been passed by City Council, those that will impact our utility for which we need to start planning. And then after each initiative, I will ask for feedback from the board and then go on to the things that we're doing today in today's world in order to address these initiatives as well as goals laid out by the board in our own strategic business plan, and talk about some possible suggestions that we have as staff on how to move forward. What we'd also like to do is invite our board members for your input as we're seeking your direction on how we move forward addressing these energy transition and decarbonization issues and initiatives moving forward. So we'll go to the first slide. I'm going to start out with our city's climate action plan passed by the City of Las Cruces Council. The vision and potential greenhouse gas emission reduction is the goal of the climate action plan with end goals of 2030 and 2050. So the ultimate vision is listed on the right, where we collectively work with all residents to embrace new ideas in the necessary transition to a carbon-free economy. With that, we have to balance long-term healthy, equitable, and a livable community for current and future generations. Ultimately, the goal of the climate action plan is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 19% or greater by 2030, and this is based on the 2018 baseline, to reduce emissions by 73% or greater by 2050, and to parallel those ambitious greenhouse gas reduction targets within 2030 and 2050. So to parallel that throughout the entire municipality. So this first chart just is directly from the actual climate action plan. It shows the baseline emissions for our community, along with the red bar represents the increased emissions based on business as usual, assuming the city didn't change or make any other new initiatives related to emissions. And then each of these initiatives or strategies outlined in the climate action plan are anticipated to result in these reductions, ultimately reducing our emissions by 73% by the year 2050. Next slide. This is another chart directly from the climate action plan. The consultant who prepared that plan did an inventory of emissions in the city of Las Cruces. First of all, I do want to mention that, you know, our city, we should be very proud of the fact that our emissions per capita were much lower than those in the Southwest with similar cities and similar populations, even compared to cities like Santa Fe and others that are our size throughout the Southwest. So as a community, we're doing a great job. And so it's wonderful to see that we're headed in that direction of the climate action plan. In this inventory, as is true through the entire United States, transportation is the majority contributor to emissions. As you know, we sit between two major interstates. We have travel within the city, and this is really consistent with what you see throughout the nation, as far as transportation being a majority of greenhouse gas emissions. Then you go to commercial and industrial building use, as well as residential buildings. Next slide. So the CAP, what I've done, all the board members have received the CAP, obviously the city council has. I've outlined the strategies of the CAP where there might be opportunities for Las Cruces utilities to make those contributions or even changes in our operations in order to meet these goals. So the first, of course, is reducing energy usage in municipal buildings. The city is actually doing that right now through an investment grade audit with JCI. They've been in the last few months switching out thermostats, LED lights, some HVAC efficiency units in order to reach that first strategy. The next one is BE2, where we initiate residential and energy efficiency programs, and we'll actually talk about that a little bit more later in the presentation. Reducing commercial building total energy use. Again, the city has started that process through their IGA project. Decarbonizing energy in buildings. And what that means is there are going to be places where we have to use natural gas or we have to use a fossil fuel. There may be some backup generator issues, other things where we know we have to have a firming energy source that may not be in renewables. So how do we offset the use of that type of energy in our buildings? Strategy RE1 is to accelerate renewable electricity adoption with focus on LMI households, low to middle income households. We'll talk a little bit later in the presentation about the new legislation related to community solar will actually help us toward the strategy. RE1A is to pursue innovative solar programs for new developments and LMI neighborhoods. Again, we'll talk more about community solar. Prioritizing solar for city buildings that serve LMI populations. So that could be any of our municipal service buildings, our parks, even our water production facilities where we're using solar power for water production energy, and that does serve our population. Others are providing mechanisms like rebates, education, community solar to encourage the adoption of solar in all sectors. Also to source renewable energy for municipal operations. And finally, I actually threw this in there. I know it doesn't have to do with decarbonization of fossil fuel use, but incentivizing waste minimization. As you know, solid waste trucks take a lot of fuel to put them on the road and travel back and forth between landfills and whatnot. So if we incentivize waste minimization, it changes our routes, it changes our landfilling infrastructure, and it does have an impact at the utility as a whole. So that's our climate action plan in a nutshell. And before I move on to the next initiative, I just want to reach out and ask if there are any questions thus far. And we'll have plenty of time to discuss. I just want to make sure we have so much to go through. I don't want to interrupt.
This is Commissioner Archuleta.
Mm-hmm.
What is an LMI population?
Low and middle income.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. All right, so let's go to the next initiative. The next is City of Las Cruces Resolution 21-153, and we refer to this as the Energy Transition Resolution. I keep telling Alma it's 21-135 because for some reason that number stuck in my head backwards, but it is 21-153. And what I've done here is I've taken that resolution and put out the now be resolved portion of it. So we had a lot of whereas statements, the things that we're addressing, references back to the climate action plan, references to Elevate Las Cruces, but this is the meat of the resolution. The first, now therefore be it resolved, is that the city will invest in the transition of the natural gas line of business to a natural gas and energy resources line of business, and will support action CE 8.3.2 of the CAP, which seeks to establish an energy transition plan and roadmap with milestones and strategies to determine the path to non-fossil fuel dependent energy, implementation of efficient use of natural gas programs, and decarbonization of the system and investments over the next 30 years. And so it's important that the meat of this, what says, establish an energy transition plan and roadmap with milestones and strategies, is directly from the city's comprehensive plan known as Elevate Las Cruces, is repeated in the climate action plan, and then set forth in this resolution. So that's one of our big goals, is we need to start the plan. We need to establish that energy transition plan. The next now therefore be it resolved is that the city will invest in energy efficiency programs, ensure energy affordability and access in our community, and commit to no actions on energy or prohibitions that will result in regressive cost shifting to LMI residents. So this goes back to our low and middle income residents. This is an extremely short, but very, very important statement. What our council is saying is decarbonization, energy efficiency, and use of those systems is very important to us. However, we cannot sacrifice affordability and access in pursuit of those energy transition goals. And this was a discussion that came from city councilors, that we are not going to commit to any actions or prohibitions that would have regressive cost shifting to our LMI residents. This has happened in some communities where they have limited your choices for energy use, and there are actually some lawsuits starting with, I'm sorry, I just lost my note, happening in other communities where maybe natural gas was banned or other energy programs were banned as use for that community. And they actually found that in new development, that's great and wonderful for the new housing people and the people who had could afford newer housing and newer programs and buy into solar and have that infrastructure. But it was actually harming the low and middle income citizens, because they couldn't afford those upgrades or participate in the upgrades. The cities didn't have anything to offset the cost of making those transitions. And so our council was really adamant to ensure that we will do no harm in our pursuit to these goals. So whenever we're thinking about energy transition or decarbonization, we need to make sure we are not negatively impacting the affordability and accessibility of energy in our community. And this one, like I said, it's a short statement, a short sentence, but very, very important in the success and financial success of our community. Next slide. The next call to action in resolution 153 is that this energy transition plan and roadmap will address retirement of the natural gas utilities debt, while simultaneously acknowledging the requirement to finance the improvement, maintenance, and repair of our natural gas infrastructure for reliability, safety, and affordability. We have obligations to our citizens to take care of the system we own today. It would be really easy for the city of Las Cruces to say, well, we're not going to be in the natural gas business anymore, sell off the utility, but then we'd have zero control over what that private company does within our own city. But in this manner, we look at that debt retirement of the natural gas utility without neglecting the safety, reliability, and affordability of our system. So the council acknowledges, even though this roadmap is going to outline in the next 30 years, or in the next 10 and 20 years, how we're going to better manage that debt or retire that debt, we are not going to neglect our system in pursuit of this goal. And so it was a very robust statement by the council, acknowledging that we do have these goals and we're going to plan for it, but we are not going to neglect or harm our system. We are going to maintain that reliability, safety, and affordability. We're very proud that we received a silver award for our SOAR award, and we're going to strive to have a gold rated system. Next slide. Another call out of the resolution is that the plan will provide for the education of citizens. Maybe they prefer natural gas for home heating and cooking, but we need to provide the educational environment and support about the financial impacts and opportunities of converting gas appliances to maybe future electric appliances. Pretty much everything we do in the city of Las Cruces, and it's very responsible in our city. And I hear it from counselors at every single meeting. What's your customer outreach look like? What does the customer education look like? Let us know how you're going to inform and engage our citizens. And that's been a priority of our council, and it's included in this resolution. The next call out is that the city is committed to reducing emissions through innovation, modernization of our infrastructure, and advanced technologies. So that helps maintain our reliable, resilient, efficient, affordable energy choices. We, even in the resolution, we call out renewable natural gas, RNG, or even putting hydrogen mixes in a natural gas system. So again, our council is acknowledging that there may be technologies that we can pursue in order to reach the decarbonization goals we've set for greenhouse gas reductions. It doesn't mean that we stop all natural gas. That's a reactive, incomplete response. Instead, we look at those technologies, we modernize our system, and we commit to being as efficient as we can while meeting these reduction efforts. I'll stop again. We have another initiative to go over, but before we move on, are there any questions thus far on resolution 21-153? Commissioner Johnson, I believe, has his hand up.
Commissioner Johnson, go ahead.
Yes, I'm trying to make sure I got the right buttons pushed here. Yeah, I think it's really important for us to not simply say, okay, it's replacing natural gas with electricity. It has to be replacing natural gas with renewable electricity. And from that, we're dependent on the suppliers in the area increasing their share or their amount of renewable electricity. Because if we simply replace gas with electricity, we actually raise our carbon footprint a little bit, because you've got the cost of making the electricity and then the cost of using it, and you end up higher carbon footprint.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. And to that point, we actually made that point during the development of the climate action plan to ensure that at all times we talked about electrification with renewables, that it wasn't electrification just for the sake of electricity, because all we're doing is shifting natural gas at the flame, burned at the stove, to having it burned at EPE's generation sites or electric generation sites. We wanted to really emphasize, and the plan does call that out, that we want to see electrification with renewables, not just for the sake of using electricity. So that's a very good point.
Now, Commissioner Bencomo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Delilah, for this presentation. I don't necessarily have a, oh, and I apologize for having my camera off. I was eating a late lunch and didn't want to put you all through seeing that. And thank you, Delilah, for the presentation. I don't have a question, more of a statement or reaction. And of course, I won't speak for the rest of my colleagues on the council, but I do just want to add that to some of these very strong statements, right, about not sacrificing service and affordability and all those things in search for this very aggressive goals. I do also want to note that I think for me, it's important that we don't see these statements as opt-outs or like an exit strategy, right? That we want to make sure that, yes, affordability is a priority, and that our efforts will be just as aggressive to make sure that low and moderate income families are able to transition, right? That we're going to invest in those kinds of programs, that yes, we're not going to damage our system, but again, that we're going to try at every single corner to make sure that we are able to meet these goals, and that we're not seeing some of these statements as a way to opt out, and instead of absolutely trying our best to make sure that we are meeting these essential goals for the future of our communities.
Thank you, Counselor, very much. That's a really good statement. And I think we can all agree the city council is committed to this change.
Okay, now Commissioner Sorg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilor Bencomo or Commissioner Bencomo brought to mind something that I've been thinking about. This is not an easy task. I think Director Walsh would agree. This is going to be somewhat difficult as we go to the future here. I would like to see us develop a plan with the help of a national level consultant in doing this, and so that we think of everything and perhaps a lot of new things we could do too to achieve goals. So that's my recommendation, is that we hire a national level consultant, and it may be right here next door at the university that or you might find such persons here. So of course we want to use our local guys first, ourselves. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Mayor, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
now,
Counselor. We do have an
Commissioner-
excellent resource in Dr. Arvizu.
Okay, Commissioner Hardy.
Thank you. On the case you mentioned before, obviously a large part of the carbon problem is what's emitted by vehicles. A large part of that is on the highways that pass through here. Are we going to continue to have to account for all the carbon that is involved here because of the highways, over which we have no control over those people that use the highways? I know this happened in Albuquerque a number of years ago when the EPA got after them for the level of pollution, and they made it tough on the citizens, but really the pollution was caused by traffic passing through on I-40 and I-25, over which they had no control whatsoever. And I presume, will we somehow just estimate the amount of carbon emitted on those highways? Will we attempt to measure it? And is there any way we can discount it?
Thank you, Commissioner Hardy. I know the way the consultant did the inventory on transmission, they actually used National Highway Transportation Board data, and that is going to be an impact. I don't know if Lisa, yeah, oh, good, there she is. Lisa LaRocque is our sustainability officer, and she was instrumental in the development of that plan, and perhaps Lisa could address that a little bit more. I know it's a reality of our community being within that that corridor, but I'll let Lisa address that if you don't mind, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Hello, commissioners. My name is Lisa LaRocque. I'm the sustainability officer for the city. And I think one thing that's really notable about the data in this, the assumption would be that the cross section of I-10 and 25 would be a big contributor. But it is not the drive, no pun intended, the driving factor in the 53% transmission. That actually represents passenger vehicles within the city limits, about 80% of that, 82, I believe, and that the balance is traffic on the highways, but a lot of people use the highways to get through the city. So the estimates are really locally based in this context. I'm not quite sure how Albuquerque did it, but that in our case it is.
Okay, Commissioner Sorg again.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I also wanted to comment on the concern about the fact that if we switch to electricity, that we're still going to be burning natural gas or fossil fuels to produce that electricity from our electrical provider, El Paso Electric. But the fact of the matter is, El Paso Electric is required by state law to go be 50% carbon free by 2030 and 100% carbon free by 2045. You can see our plan here is going to be for 30 years. So we're timing it so it's very close. So even if we don't produce our electricity ourselves with solar or wind for that matter, the El Paso Electric will be producing it carbon free. In fact, I just got out of a meeting earlier today from El Paso Electric, in which they are shooting for a 22% renewable energy by next year, the end of 2022. They're presently at 8, and they're planning to build 200 megawatt system, actually 2 systems that are about 100 megawatts each. So they're going to be at 22% by next year. Fact of the matter is, because we have the Palo Verde atomic plant in Arizona, we range from 40 to 60% carbon free now, because in the wintertime, we don't use a lot of electricity, you know. That gets as high as 60%, including a little 8% renewable energy or solar energy too. But in the summertime, of course, it's much less, and they use a lot of natural gas for the air conditioners in the area here. So, but it'll be okay. We're timing everything together here, trying to coordinate. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Walsh.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. We'll go to the next slide and talk about the last, what I'm calling an initiative, which is the City of Las Cruces Comprehensive Plan, otherwise known as Elevate Las Cruces. And as part of the strategies called out in Elevate, the first one is encouraging green building technologies for new development and retrofitting existing development. The next is providing incentives for development sites that are already served by water and wastewater. That may not seem like it is related to energy transition, but it is, because the less effort we have to put into water production, if we don't have to build in new lift stations, new wells, new pumps, we can use our existing infrastructure. It really does contribute to the amount of energy we're using to provide our water and wastewater services. So infill is a great thing, not only for the City of Las Cruces' development, but it's a great thing for maintenance of our infrastructure and actually fully utilizing what we have in place today without having to invest in more facilities and more infrastructure and more pumps. By utilizing what we have today, infill is a very positive contributor to helping us prevent future emissions. The next one is Action CE 8.1.2, and that's incorporating renewable energy preferences into existing building codes. So in other words, as things are built out, how are we encouraging the use of renewables? Finally, we have coordinating with the local utility companies to develop a renewable energy plan for the community. So it's not just Las Cruces utilities. We provide pretty much every utility but electricity and telephone and cable within the city. But how can we coordinate not only our 30-year plan, but work with El Paso Electric? So Councilor Sorg reference to meeting with EPE is demonstrative to how successful a partnership can be if we're all working together toward the same goal. Next, again, providing educational resources and incentives to customers about energy conservation, as well as the benefits of renewable energy. Next slide. Elevate also calls for us to promote alternative energy manufacturing and construction as a business sector of our city, not just as how our residents live, but as an actual sector within our city. And we'll talk about community solar and how that's a possibility. Also installing additional electric vehicle charging stations at city facilities. As Lisa mentioned, and I very much thank her for that, I didn't realize that 80% of that emissions transportation inventory was just traveling. I didn't realize the number was that high. It's been a while since I looked at the data. But by having those charging stations at city facilities, you're encouraging the use and adoption of electric vehicles. Here we are again, developing our energy transition roadmap. That's exactly what we've been talking about. Enhancing educational materials regarding curbside recycling, composting. Again, if you can reduce the amount of waste traveling to and from homes into the landfill, you reduce the operational costs and emissions related to transporting that waste. Finally, we have Action 11.2.4, exploring options to utilize the ecological services of wetlands and green infrastructure to clean water. And we've had these discussions. I know talking to John, we've had an algae experiment happening with NMSU in partnership with NMSU at the Jacob Hands wastewater treatment plant. And exploring those options and opportunities in the future is a win-win, not only for us, but for our community and our environment as a whole. Are there any questions regarding Elevate before I move on to the next one?
Yes, Commissioner Carmichael.
Commissioner Carmichael, I just want to support what really has been stated by a few others already, but first off, it's so far what we've seen and read deserves a compliment to Lisa and the team that's been working on this for quite some time now. Great job, great plan. I'm especially glad to see the mission statement include the involvement of residents. That's going to continue to be very, very critical, I think, in accomplishing our objectives. And the notion of it being equitable and keeping that in the forefront of everyone's thinking. Also in the values, it's really nice to see the comment in there about water in the values section. It's my hope that at some point we can develop a equally comprehensive plan to cover our not only 10-year, but 40-year and beyond water planning and getting into the real meat of the actions. It needs to be, in my opinion, it needs to be just as comprehensive and involve the city council and outside other forces just as much as energy transition does. I'm also really glad to see the outreach portion and the education. I've been reading some about some really innovative thinking that some communities are doing with that in terms of like driver education. You know, you drive around here and you see people accelerate right up to the stop sign and then do a screeching halt. And then they take off like a rabbit, you know. That has some real, and I know Lisa and others know this, but that has some real concrete data as to the impact of our driving habits on our carbon emissions. So it's really good to see us thinking about that. One really interesting one was one community, I can't think of which one it was right now, but had implemented a 1 degree day each week, where they had convinced the community through data to turn down their thermostats or turn them up, whichever the case might be, 1 day a week, certain hours or the entire 24 hours. And it was quite impactful to see the results of that. Finally, supporting what Ms. Walsh said early and what was commented on by Commissioner Sorg and others, it's really not going to be easy. You know, we need to move forward with all of these strategies and objectives, but at the same time, be very careful about not letting it distract us from our basic utility mission. And I don't know what our staff's plan is to begin to look at that, but I see the utility department popping up many places in this plan as a responsible or participating party. It's going to take dollars, it's going to take staff, and which of those dollars go to the ratepayers and where the rest of the money comes from is something that is going to have a lot of thought put into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Carmichael, for your comment on drivers.
I have to agree. Thank you. So we'll go to the next slide. So now let's talk community solar. This is Senate Bill 84 that was passed during this 2021 legislative session. So community solar is the opportunity, and just for a brief explanation, in today's world, if I want to generate solar and interconnect with EPE, I cannot provide that energy for anyone else but myself. So it's perfectly fine for me to, as a city building or city utility, to build in solar panels at a production site or on one of my buildings in order to use the power at said building. So if we have solar panels on parking structures, or we have solar panels at our well production sites, so long as that power is going back into the subject property, that's allowed. Of course, we still have to work on interconnect agreements with EPE. However, we cannot share that solar energy with anyone else. And that was prior to the passage of SB 84. Now with SB 84, right now, the Public Regulation Commission is going through the rulemaking process in order to comply with SB 84. They have to establish statewide annual capacity caps and allocation parameters and processes for subscriber organizations. One of their call outs for their goals is they have to limit or prevent cross subsidization, such that ratepayers of one energy group are not subsidizing these projects. And so I haven't read that in detail yet, but that's the intent. Now, the initial statewide program of SB 84 is there is a program cap of 200 megawatts for the entire state of New Mexico in the first 3 years. Under the analysis that was done for the legislation, it was assumed El Paso Electric's territory, in there would be an allowable 20 megawatts worth of community solar projects in our region. And so in EPE's New Mexico region, that has nothing to do with what they're doing in Texas. The projects are limited to 5 megawatts, which is a pretty big, that's a 20-acre project. So, but that's the cap. You could have a project that is maybe 1 megawatt versus 5 megawatts, but that's the cap. For each project, there have to be at least 10 subscribers to that community solar system, or 10 users, end users. No one single subscriber can own more than 40% of the capacity generated in the project. You can co-locate with other energy resources. So if you're doing a methane cogeneration or battery site, or you already have something else, another solar garden or solar farm, you can co-locate with those facilities. And then 30% of each project capacity is reserved for the benefit of low-income customers. So though we don't have a project right now in hand, as we're awaiting this rulemaking process, and Lisa's getting emails probably daily or weekly on companies who would like to be part of community solar projects. But an ideal project would maybe be a 1 megawatt, 5-acre project that has a low-income housing or subsidized housing facility and other city facilities or resources with 9 other subscribers to be part of that project and use your energy. So we're awaiting that rulemaking process to see what is going to happen and the expectations of the PRC. And as a city, the city of Las Cruces needs to decide, are we going to promote a project? We as a utility, and I've already told the city manager, and I apologize to the board, but if there is an economic development opportunity in the industrial park and we need to run an actual solar project, the utility is willing to step in and be that entity. If we need to create a solar garden or a solar farm at the industrial site and work on users and capacity and billing, we're already in place to be a utility. We're in place to bill users. We've got those resources ready. And so we need to see how community solar is going to impact us, not only as a utility, but as a city. And what are the economic development plans of the city? And what are the community development plans of the city when it comes to community solar? So I want to pause for a moment and see if there are any questions for community solar. Lisa's the one is our expert on this legislation. We've picked it apart a little bit. We know there's some issues with retail electricity and where we want to be, but we are watching the rulemaking process. I have everything calendared to keep an eye on that.
Okay, Commissioner Johnson.
Yes, I think I'm unmuted here. We've talked solar specifically, and a day like today, it certainly emphasizes that Las Cruces is rich in that resource, but we also have a lot of wind resources. Unfortunately, access to them are probably mostly on federal land, but over on the Oregons, there's a lot of wind energy that could be harnessed to bring in renewables. And I think we don't, at least we want to keep that in mind when we're developing overall plans, that Cruces has two big things going for it. It's hot as the devil and the wind blows all the time.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. I believe when I looked at the wind map for the state of New Mexico, and it's been a few years, I think Lucio showed me a more recent one, we didn't have enough consistent wind flow where it's persistently windy. Like if you go through Curry County, it's windy every day. There is no season for Clovis. It's windy every single day. So they show a higher potential for wind energy. I haven't looked at wind maps lately. I know ours wasn't consistent and persistent enough, but it could be somewhere else in the region. We just haven't looked at it, but that's a good point too.
Okay, Commissioner Bencomo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe this question could be for Delilah or Lisa if she's on. Just so that I can conceptualize this with a specific example, I know that some members of the council are pushing for potential state shade structures that will go at the downtown plaza to have solar panels. I'm curious about how a project like that would fit into this community solar model.
Lila, I'll field that one. I've been
Okay.
working on it as well. This is Lisa for the record, LaRock. And thank you, Commissioner Bencomo. That's a great question. And I think having this second option of community solar is a great opportunity for us, because if it's cost effective to put solar directly on a building or infrastructure, then that's the way to go, because ultimately we can own it and have zero costs. But in other situations where it is difficult because of the architecture of the building or the repairs necessary to put it on, or the lack of land by infrastructure, then community solar is a great option. Or if you're renting, is a great option. So I actually, not to do a spoiler alert, am recommending that we don't put solar on the shade panels, but instead use community solar to tap into that, because the price, I have a price point for when I say something isn't a good solar investment, and doing it aesthetically in the plaza made the price point too high to consider it when we do now have community solar in front of us.
Thank you so much for that, Lisa. That's really helpful. And if it comes from Lisa, I trust it, because I think you're absolutely the issue expert, and we're really lucky to have you in the city. And I was in agreement from before that it was too expensive. But anyway, I digress the conversation. I appreciate that answer, mostly because I just feel like I'm very visual. And so I needed to sort of put that into a specific example. Thank you, Delilah and Lisa.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So we'll go to our next slide. So those were a summary of the initiatives that we're facing. And I didn't even put in the State's Energy Act simply because we're already doing it. And as Commissioner Sorg mentioned, EP is already shooting toward those goals. And we are not an energy generator. We are simply a provider. So I didn't cover that one. So what are we doing now? I first want to acknowledge that, yes, we have a climate action plan. Yes, we have resolution 153. Yes, we have Elevate Las Cruces. But even prior to the adoption of these plans by the City Council, the utility has been progressive in our efforts towards sustainability. So the first one, and I'm just going to go over the projects that we've already have initiated or are currently providing. And the first is upgrading the meters to the AMI infrastructure network. And this is the automatic meter reading that we do, putting the ERTs in our meters, switching out meters. Essentially, we've reduced the need for meter reader individuals and vehicles to be on the road, thus reducing the crosstown travel, which aligns with one of our CAP strategies. If you look at your PowerPoint slide deck, at the PDF almost sent you, there's actually a blank slide at the very end because we were hoping to give you those emission reduction numbers. Unfortunately, we just don't have the data ready yet for this meeting, but we are working on that so we can present it to you on what we've saved through AMI. That's reduced our fleet emissions, reduced the need for rereads, reduced the need for disconnects and reconnects whenever we see leaks or anything like that. Leak detection for effective water conservation and management. This system is amazing. Let me go back to, we just had a customer service meeting a few days ago, and I apologize for my flipping through our notes. One of our analysts, James Stafford, he notifies customers when he sees continuous use or peak continuous use with customers. Since December, just December of 2020, this last December, he's notified over 312 customers. If we were to add up the daily leak that we've caught since December with these customers, it amounts to 2.4 million gallons a day in leak loss. So yes, on one side, the utility, if customers resolve those leaks and get them fixed, okay, we're not getting revenue because the customer has to pay for that leak water. Once it's past the meter, you're going to pay for that water. But by eliminating that 2.4 million gallons per day in leak loss, we don't have to produce that water at our wells. We're lowering the related energy cost to water production. And it gets to that energy water nexus where we're able to reduce that and save on energy related to production. We've also got real-time automatic leak detection systems for the city, which reduces the water production energy consumption. And so we have our leak detection technicians are out there. They're finding leaks, and our board, you were privy to that demonstration when our leak detection staff came in and showed you the small leaks that they find in our system simply because of the system. We're very excited, as you know, and you've had this demo also, of the customer real-time monitoring system, Utility Hawk, which encourages that end user consumption reduction. My neighbor had a leak in his irrigation system, and I was able to walk him through Utility Hawk, and sure enough, the minute he turned on his irrigation system, we monitored it and he was able to see that continuous use and consumption and identified the leak. Now, unfortunately, he fixed his leak, and my garden was built next to his wall where his leak was, so I actually have to water my own garden now, but but it did help in his savings. So this was one of the first initiatives, and these are the benefits of that through our AMI network upgrade. Next slide. We've also installed solar collectors and entered into power purchase agreement partnerships at our water production site. We'll go back to the LCU East Mesa Water Reclamation Facility. This is not a new thing. We did this before any of these initiatives or actions came into place. You've all seen our East Mesa Water Reclamation Facility. It does house a 328 kilowatt direct current system. This year, though, in 2020 and now in 2021, and Lisa and Adrian Widmer, they can attest that we've got quite a big project going on right now with Amoresco, which is the purchased power agreement. And this is adding 3,056 kilowatts PV generation at sites throughout the entire city. So we have some at our water production wells, and a few of our wells. There's another site at the airport that is being installed. And so this is a big project, and it's not all about the utility, even though I try to make everything about the utility. This is the city's initiative as a whole. And it's a pretty neat and big deal that we're doing this. The next one is the removal of the gas engine blowers and construction and installation of the cogeneration equipment at Jacob Hands. So through that, once we're operating, everything's working the way it is, and we're finally at a good point where it really is, we anticipate displacing 2,300 metric tons of emissions by switching to that cogen system. So we do firm up the system using natural gas, but we've eliminated diesel bolt blowers. And when you look at the natural gas burn, in addition to the methane burn, displacing the diesel burn, that's a huge contributor to reducing those carbon emissions. Next slide. We are recommending a decarbonization rate rider as part of our current natural gas review process, the gas rate review process. We've asked for inclusion of, or actually we did include electric vehicle costs with the latest rate review in our solid waste rate review. And so no, we unfortunately, they don't make electric trash trucks yet, but any of our lower fleet replacements that are related to solid waste, we have committed to electric vehicles. And Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the city of Las Cruces and the council passed an electric vehicle commitment resolution in order to ensure our fleet replacement does focus on electric vehicles. Is that correct?
Yes, Delilah, that is correct. We have committed to converting 50% of our fleet to electric vehicles by 2030 by 2030. And then there are other efforts that we're doing to encourage electric vehicle use by the EV chargers and some other projects that we're doing. But we even have a software program where people can compare the life cycle costs of each vehicle and choose the right EV match for them. So we're very excited about the possibility of making this transition and seeing how quickly it's being done.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And I want to give Lisa kudos as well as everybody else that was on the electric bus committee for the RFP, because, oh my gosh, I read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages on electric buses and proposals, and it's exciting, but oh boy, but we're moving in that direction. We're also looking at, we already have, the board has in the passage of our latest reiteration of our strategic business plan for FY23 or 22, I'm sorry. We added the and energy to our natural gas line of business. So we could take opportunities in planning for sustainable energy and energy blending, as well as a more modified, more diverse portfolio in what we're providing to our citizens. One thing I didn't include that is related to this line, and I was talking to staff because I thought about it at 4:30 in the morning and I forgot to write it down, but I remembered again. As part of the strategic business plan, Lucio even included a possible program in future business plans and for the utility called the Sustainable Energy Development Program that we would house within the utility in order to look at sustainable energy, renewables, and decarbonization. So that's already in our business plan and forward thinking for our next iteration. Right now, we are currently in another IGA with Johnson Controls, which is installation of higher efficiency systems at Jacob Hands. That was one of the latest bond projects that you approved, looking at lighting, HVAC, et cetera. This is part of the big effort made by the entire city where we're upgrading thermostats and LEDs and systems. We've also implemented Routeware in our solid waste vehicles. And so by doing so, we've been able to find through data and not just anecdotal evidence, more efficient solid waste route creation. And what's great about this is talking to Robin, it looks like based on city growth, we may have to add another route to our solid waste vehicles in 2023 and 2024. And the way we've set up based on the Routeware data is we've built in room for that route, I believe on Mondays. That's where we're looking at the growth routes to happen with the growth at East Mesa. But adding another route doesn't mean we're adding another truck on the road. We're also working with South Central Solid Waste on their proposals for a East Mesa transfer station in order to cut down on the amount of miles that the vehicles on the roads and service those areas of the city. So using that data and having that data is giving us the opportunity to use our trucks more efficiently. Any questions there on current projects or actions? Thank you. So next slide. So what we have on tap, essentially, we're still working on our master plans. We've got a lot of planning that we're still looking at. We have to look at CIP. Commissioners, you all have already mentioned it takes money and it takes effort. It takes planning to make sure we do this responsibly. We are looking at additional PV generation particularly at our water production sites, and even for the utility administration building as it exists today. We can easily, not easily, it costs money, but we have the potential there to expand the use of cogeneration at Jacob Hands. So we really could put in a third cogen in order, and we have enough methane production at that site for it to be effective at Jacob Hands. We talked about urban canopy projects last summer when we talked to the board about energy transition. This is something that we would work through our water conservation office with Rhonda Diaz, and what are those possibilities for urban cooling, as well as we had a really good discussion with staff when we were going through the slide that there are trees that are low use water that could actually reduce evaporation. So, you know, finding that right balance of water usage for the trees versus water conservation by lowering evaporation, cooling our city. We live in a hot city. I believe, is it 100 degrees yet? I know we were close to 100 after lunch. So those are other opportunities. We've talked about gas peak shaving and demand management, similar to what the IOUs do on the electric utility side. Integration of the natural gas use systems with renewable sources. Perhaps we have a primary renewable project with using natural gas only as a firming source for that energy, just like we do with the cogens. We are working on digester gas storage and upgrades. Can we use that gas for other energy opportunities? And then optimizing the AMI system to reduce fleet emissions. And so right now we've got so much AMI data, and we've been focusing on leak detection and things like that. But as we upgrade the AMI systems and get that data, we may have opportunities for developing response routes rather than reactive response when it comes to either leaks or meter issues on the gas or the water side. Also our SCADA systems. I mean, it's a ton of data, which is why I've asked in the strategic business plan, we were proposing an MIS, a management of information systems program. How do we use that data to be more efficient? Next slide. So the next steps, this is the whole meat. I kind of just spewed everything at you, told you where we are, where we have been, where we're going. And this is the meat of our work session today. Is a staff recommendation is that we do follow resolution 21-153 and start the process of an energy transition plan. And I did make note of Councillor Sorg's recommendation that we look for a national level consultant. I was talking to staff, and this is something that's being faced by communities throughout the country. It's not just something being addressed with Las Cruces, and we don't know what kind of support is going to come out of the federal government or initiatives coming from the federal government, because we do have a different administration right now with different objectives and goals when it comes to climate action. Carl Clark had a great idea. Similar to what we do with the IGA projects and performance projects, we did the investment grade audit and performance bonds for the AMI upgrade. We did the same thing with the city of Las Cruces for the upgrades at Jacob Hands, where those energy savings are paying for the debt needed for those upgrades. What if we develop a scope of work for a possible IGA performance contract related to sustainability efforts or decarbonization efforts or transition efforts, and actually realizing those opportunities. So yes, well, if we have an energy transition plan, that's great, but then how do we make those things happen? And just like the commissioners have said, or Commissioner Carmichael, we want to see the action too, not just the plan. How do we get the action done? And maybe we do that through an IGA. Also, hopefully, as we go through the rate review and we get our public comment, we can implement that decarbonization rate rider, which thus helps us create household efficiency incentive programs using that rider and using the funds from that rider and encouraging those sort of processes through energy savings and efficiency. And so we'll see that through our gas rate review, and if that's supported by our ratepayers.
Commissioner Bencomo.
Thanks, Delilah. One of the only other things I wanted to make sure to lift up again, I had lifted it up at our council meeting before, was about, you know, as we plan in this transition, to make sure that there are no job losses, right? That no one at the gas utility loses a job in this transition. In fact, that we're growing it, right? And making sure that we're also part of this plan is also investing in workforce development and trainings for your current staff, for new staff, so that we can make sure everyone has the tools and skills necessary to continue with the utility.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
This is way a little. The utility has for decades prided itself on not losing staff through modernization or other efficiencies. Now, Commissioner Archuleta.
Yes, I have a question or comment with regard to tomorrow's projects. One of these days, El Paso Electric is going to go to demand management. They're going to go to time of day rates. It's in the future. It should be part of their conservation program and to enact demand management. So one of these days, as the contracts are up for renewal, you can probably expect that demand management will be part of that equation with the energy provider. So one of the things that can be done and could be done now in anticipation is with a SCADA system, there are energy management software programs where you pick the most efficient provider based on horsepower and based on the efficiency of the pump. And I don't know whether we fill our tanks at night or not during the summertime and then bring them down. But like I said, right now, we don't have time of day race, but it's a matter of time before that happens. So we could begin to invest in software that would produce the most efficient pump, in order to deliver the water to a particular part of the city.
Great, thank you. We can go to the last slide if you'd like. And really, this is what I'm asking now as board recommendation. I think, like I said, I believe we should start with the energy transition plan, our 30-year plan. That should be a next step. And we need to start looking at national consultants and then moving forward, taking action. Obviously we want to continue what we're doing today when it comes to sustainability. And I'm excited once we get the numbers back after our MMV with JCI on what emission reductions we've already experienced from the IGA projects that we've done. That's going to be exciting. But I think my recommendation, our next step is going to be having that plan. But I really do want to hear from the board members if you have any input on, I'm taking notes now, but if you have any input of things that we need to consider. Or even disagreements with what we've listed. But I think, I've got to say, it is exciting to work with a city and an organization where the partnerships are so valued between our departments, and we can have that communication. And it's not just a directive from council. These resolutions were developed with input from the utility and sustainability and our counselors. And so it says a lot about our ability to work together to achieve these goals.
Okay, Commissioner Sorg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, first of all, this decarbonization charge that you're suggesting, could you just go through the possible ways of using that money? How would you use it?
Thank you, Commissioner Sorg. What we've talked about in staff and even during our public hearings was we envision this a way to promote energy efficiency programs, particularly in our LMI areas. So, we've actually talked to EPE because they're looking at programs to improve efficiency in older homes. And so Joe Provencio, our Deputy Director of Business Services, he's actually been meeting with them, as well as Lucio Garcia, who's the Deputy Director for our natural gas line of business. Both gentlemen have met with EPE to talk about their efficiency programs for older homes and how we can partner to identify those opportunities to have efficiency and appliance upgrades. And if we can't switch them out of natural gas, maybe we get them a more efficient unit so the emissions are reduced, as well as providing that affordability and cost savings to the customer at the end route. So that's one example. We have been partnering with EPE on their efforts for efficiency upgrades within our community.
So you're suggesting that we do work with El Paso Electric when we're decarbonizing. So because we're going to end up going to electricity, they have to be at the table, and they are willing, from what I heard today at the Mavita luncheon, they are willing to do just that. So it was refreshing, at least, if not more than that, to hear that from El Paso Electric. They have new management, and I think they're going to be helpful in that. Another thing too, I'm expecting some national and even state funding that we could leverage too. Are we keeping an eye on those possibilities as they may come down from above?
I hope so, Commissioner. But I know we've actually, Lisa's given us some great resources and agencies that we can start putting into our tickler systems to track that information. And of course, she and Amy Bassford at our grants office do a great job doing so. And we want to be ready with those projects. We really need, and that's the thing, everybody, it's always easy when you're shovel ready. So we need to get to that point.
Yeah, right. Okay, well, thank you very much. That's helpful.
Vice Chair Archuleta.
Yes, I had another comment. One of the things that I think we ought to start doing, like we do water conservation, we report on the water conservation use, per capita use, that type of thing, how much water we divert and what have you, but we don't report on energy use. I think we ought to start beginning to report on energy use from our wells, from our wastewater plants, and lift stations and pump stations and what have you, and begin to take a look at the energy use at each of these facilities. For example, some of the wells may not be using the most efficient impellers, and there might be more efficient impellers that ought to be changed out in order to use less energy. But if we, like anything else, if you can measure it, you can probably realize the savings. So I would like to see, as a board member, that we begin to report energy use at our facilities periodically and see how we're tracking and have goals for reduction, just like we do for water. And I think that would be one of the ways that we could save energy, is basically starting to measure it and starting to account for it. Just like Commissioner Carmichael mentioned, turn down at the thermostat 1 degree. And if you know what you're using, you're probably going to be able to start saving and provide more ideas and thoughts in terms of how you can be much more energy efficient.
Well, that's excellent.
Anyone else?
Yes,
Commissioner Bencomo.
thank you. One more question, Delilah. I'm still unclear about the decarb rate rider. Could you just talk a little bit more about that so I can understand it better? And then would it be sort of across all customers?
Yes, yeah. And Joe Provencio, I'll let him jump in to correct me if I have anything wrong, but essentially what would happen, and what we've built into this rate review process, is saying our goal is to raise $500,000 that we're going to invest in energy efficiency programs that thus reduce our emissions. So essentially, and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we estimated it would be a few cents per decatherm to implement such a rate rider, and it would be applied to every user on their per decatherm usage. And I'll actually turn it over to Joe if he could clarify a little bit better. He's more articulate than I am.
Chairman, Commissioner Bencomo, that's correct. It's almost exactly the same type of program El Paso Electric has, and not just El Paso Electric, but the other investor-owned gas utilities in the state have an efficiency use rider that collects, raises funds through that charge from all customers, because energy efficiency is a system or a utility goal, not a particular class of customer type of goal. Our target is initially some of the more challenging areas in our service area where there's a lot of older gas appliances that have the opportunity to be displaced. And with that efficiency gain with newer appliances, you reduce the gas house emissions as well as lowering the energy bill.
Okay, thank you, Joe. And so maybe just to follow up, and again, I'm definitely not an expert in this at all, right? But so I'm just trying to understand, is there a way to ensure that this sort of rate making is more equitable so that, we're reducing the risk of placing a higher cost burden on potential customers who already might not have enough money to make the transition, right? And ensuring that there is not a higher cost burden on lower to moderate income families.
Chairman and Commissioner Bencomo, these processes and programs have pretty much been in place for at least the past 10, 15 years. And the whole concept here is to target the areas that have the highest opportunity to achieve those savings at the most effective cost. So I understand your concern in terms of, how do we equalize or equalize the burden? The highest opportunity to achieve those efficiency gains are some of the older appliances that have been in use for many years. And it's geared and tied to, it's a cost benefit type of ratio that achieves and assists the customers to get and change out older inefficient appliances to newer efficiency appliances.
Great, Joe. Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I just saw Lisa's hand go up as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Bencomo, for noticing. I just wanted to echo what Joe Provencio said, in the sense that I think all of us are really committed to addressing the low and moderate income community and trying to try to give them clean energy and diminish and lower their cost burdens. And one of the things that you could couple is if we did do the community solar and those low and moderate income houses were to come on board with that, you could switch out and become all electric for those houses that have the end of life utility, end of life with some of their appliances. And then we serve both purposes of bringing in the low and moderate income community that we need to have as 30% of our user base in the community solar. We lower the cost burden for those people, and so that's a win-win solution. So you would, when is the time to make the transition is the big question on there, and finding ways to be efficient and has lots of different options to explore, but just to marry those two concepts.
Great, thank you both. If there's anything I've learned in the year and a half that I've been here, is that the LCU is deeply committed to equity and affordability, and I think it's just an important issue to continue raising in this conversation. So thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Vice Chair Archuleta.
Yes, I have one other comment. After listening to the whole program and some of the comments that were made, there was a comment made by Commissioner Sorg that we ought to hire a nationally recognized firm to help us in developing an energy management program. I agree with him. I mean, we run a huge utility, and there's some good ideas here, but I think they're not all the ideas that could be put together. So I think if we were to hire somebody that specializes in this business, it would be very helpful to the staff and very helpful to the board. So I guess I'm endorsing Commissioner Sorg's idea that we hire somebody to try to help put this all together. in a comprehensive manner. Thank you.
And Lisa LaRoque.
Thank you again. I want to commend utilities like the rest of you and having so many innovative steps that they've taken towards reducing their carbon footprint and just testing new technologies like the cogen and all of that. I just think it's terrific. And there is only a handful of natural gas municipal utilities in the country. So there's, I believe, less than a dozen. And so it is a unique breed of people because you're not driven by the, meeting the stockholders' needs. You're driven by providing good service. And that's a whole different set of equations. And there are other cities that are doing that. Philadelphia has taken a really deep dive into that. And I would be happy to bring different plans forward and to Delilah and staff to review, to be able to, and anyone else who's interested, of course, to be able to review the different strategies and see what approach might resonate best under these conditions and see, from there. Because if there's one thing I learned in sustainability is that you're always in uncharted territory. And so the more people you can follow, the better off you are.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. That's a good step for this effort.
Okay, anyone else?
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are going to move forward on our actions to start on the energy transition plan, and we've included it with our strategic business plan. And as Councilor Commissioner Sorg mentioned, it's a big effort and it's going to take some time and some money and some implementation. And we are looking at possibly a 30-year transition. And but I think we have a really great team in place to make it happen.
Okay, well, thank you for the presentation. If the work session work is completed, I can stop the work session now and we can begin the regular meeting immediately thereafter. I'm going to, without objection, close the work session at 3:08. Then I'm going to call the regular session to order in about 5 minutes. So don't turn off your computers or anything rash like that. And we'll be starting with the regular meeting here shortly. Okay, this is William Little. I'm going to call the regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners, the City of Las Cruces Utilities to order. The first order of business is to remind everyone that we are under the Attorney General's guidance in terms of remote operations, so that be sure if you speak that you identify yourself before you begin speaking. And when we get around to taking votes, we will take all those votes by roll call. And if the connection to the outside world is somehow or another broken, we need to suspend our deliberations until such time as that connection is restored. Now, for the meeting itself, the first order of business is inquiring of the board and staff. Is there any member of the board or any member of the city staff that has any known conflict of interest with any item on the agenda And I'm going to call the roll. Vice Chair Archuleta,
No,
Commissioner Bencomo, skipping Commissioner Bencomo, Commissioner Carmichael,
No.
Commissioner Hardy,
No.
Commissioner Johnson,
No,
Commissioner Sword.
No,
Okay, back to Commissioner Bencomo.
No, thank you.
Thank you. And staff,
None for staff.
thank you, and none for the chair. Thank you all. The next order of business is that I need to read into the record a statement concerning our closed session from May 13th. And I'm just going to read. Las Cruces Board of Commissioners for the City of Las Cruces Utilities met in closed session on May 13th, 2021 at 1 p.m. The following members were in attendance: me, Vice Chair Archuleta, Commissioner Bencomo, Commissioner Carmichael, Commissioner Hardy, Commissioner Johnson, and Commissioner Sword. Staff members present were Ifo Pili, City Manager, Delilah Walsh, Utilities Director, Adrian Widmer, Utilities Assistant Director, Jose Provencio, Utilities Business Services Deputy Director, Mario Puentes, Utilities Gas Business Systems Analyst, and Robert Cabello, Deputy City Attorney. The meeting adjourned at 2:19 p.m. A statement for the record is as follows. Las Cruces Board of Commissioners for the City of Las Cruces Utilities met in closed session and only discussed the items on the posted notice, which was to discuss, excuse me, the items on the posted notice, which was to discuss matters concerning potential litigation from natural gas expenses occurred during the February Arctic storm, which is closed pursuant to NMSA 1978, Section 10:15(1)(h)(7). And that concludes the statement for the record of the closed meeting. Next item of business is acceptance of the agenda. Motion to approve.
Move to approve.
I'll
Your
second
name?
that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, that was Commissioner Bencomo
Sword.
and Commissioner Sword second. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda? Hearing none, ready for a vote. Vice Chair Archuleta,
aye.
Commissioner Bencomo,
Yes.
Commissioner Carmichael,
Yes.
Commissioner Hardy,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
aye.
Commissioner Sword,
Yes,
and the chair, yes. Now, the next item of business is the public participation. Members of the public were noticed and had an opportunity to participate by Zoom webinar video. Did we receive any public comments in advance of the meeting?
Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioner Alma Ruiz, Utilities Senior Office Manager. We did not receive any public comments via email, and I still see 3 public attendees via Zoom, so you could ask them if there is any at this time.
Okay.
Seeing none, I don't see any hands up, Chair. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We will go on. Next item of business is the LCU Board Administrative Report.
Thank you, Commissioner. Delilah Walsh, Utilities Director for the record, and we'll start with our first slide with Mr. Jose Provencio.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners. Jose Provencio, Deputy Director, Business Services. This month's report will bring you up to date in regard to utility assistance programs for the month of April and May. In the slides you provided, I provided all the activity encompassing these two months, and the information it presents itself in terms of in dollars and number of customers assisted. If I could ask the slide to be advanced. Moving on to the next slide. Again, I've provided a historical timeline of all the utility assistance that has been executed since the beginning of the pandemic, with the initial fiscal year 21 budget funding, and then all the subsequent funding replenishments. At this point, we have the continued emergency assistance funding, pretty much that ran its course mid-month in April. The statistics that the amount of assistance that was extended to the customers at the end of May. If I could ask the slide to be advanced. This summarizes a most recent budget transfer of $50,000 to provide funding for customers till with the expectation till the end of this fiscal year. The numbers here provided the assistance both to residential and commercial customers, and the remaining balance as of the end of May. I want to update the board in regard to, with the commencement of the new fiscal year, utilities will commence the program that's been budgeted under the Casa de Peregrinos and the memorandum of understanding to assist our residential customers only. So starting the new fiscal year, in summary, we will return to the basic function of the utility assistance program that is managed by our CDP partner, Casa de Peregrinos. And this is focused towards residential customers.
Okay, Commissioner Johnson.
Yes, I just wanted to make clear, if we put the rate rider in that we discussed in the work session related to natural gas, that amount will also be paid by these people that are on these utility assistance programs. Is that correct?
Chairman, Commissioner Johnson, the proposed decarbonization rate rider would apply to all customers for all consumption to fund the initiatives that Director Walsh described.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, the next slide, thank you very much, provides in graphical form the status of the extended assistance funding via the budget fund transfer that we received last month. It gives you a pictorial representation of remaining and expended funds. I'll stand by for any questions you may have.
This is William Little. I have one. Where do we stand with the moratorium on cutoffs?
Chairman, Commissioner, at this time, it is a topic that is reaching a certain point of decision making. We are closely following the procedures that have been outlined by the commission in Santa Fe, as they're addressing the same issue with all the other utilities in the state, investor-owned utilities. There will be a transition that we will move towards in instituting a return to normal operations and normal services That includes eventual shut off of services for non-payment. We anticipate that date to be concurrent around the late August timeframe. We're making preparations for that transition, and we do believe that we still have to provide some notice, which we are prepared to do, and that is the eventual timeline. As we follow the same type of timeline that the Commission in Santa Fe is laying out.
Thank you.
Okay, Chairman, Commissioners, concluding the Utility Assistance Program summary, we will transition into the budget comparison for the third quarter for this budget year. We'll begin the presentation and briefing in stating the overall revenue and expenses performance for the third quarter. And the data and the chart shows there that the utility as a whole is in good condition, and revenues are ahead of expenses. And at this point, I will go into the detail for each one of the each of the specific utilities. And if I could ask the slide to be advanced. Presentation and information for the gas utility. We are showing and representing growth in revenues and concurrent increase in some of the expenses. Prime driver for this type of performance, number one, is overall growth in the city. But the other factor that's impacting this is the slow resumption of the increase or change or adjustments in the cost of gas, which is slowly advancing to the more historical values than when we experienced earlier last fiscal year, where the gas prices were extremely low. In terms of sales, we are selling more decatherms, and in terms of new customers, we're adding new customers. So all in all, at least for the third quarter, we show the performance of the utility as they move out of their peak operation season and they move on into the other utilities, especially water, their peak operating system. Just a note here that the third quarter financials did not reflect the bump and the expenses that we experienced with the February freeze. That will present itself in the fourth quarter review. We can advance to the next slide for the water review and budget presentation and performance. Water shows very healthy revenue generation for their operations and good management of a lot of the expenses. Most of the expenses are driven with timing, with some service contracts that are pending and likely to be closed out towards the end of the year. Regardless, sales and production concurrently have increased in the water utility, also reflecting customer growth as the construction boom continues here in the city. But overall, budget projections are very much in line with expectations, and water is in good shape. If I can ask the slide to be advanced to the wastewater section. Wastewater, in terms of budget comparison, is well within the limits of comparison and for expectations for the budget year. Like the other utilities, there's a good growth in terms of revenue and good management of expenses. And much like in the water, there's some pending services and contracts that will be hopefully completed before the end of the fiscal year and reflected in the budget comparison and the financial. And if I could ask the slide to be advanced to review the solid waste. And solid waste utility, much like the other utilities, has shown growth in revenue and good management in expenses based on projections. All is in good order with respect to their continued operations. It's expected that they'll wrap up the year in good order also. And if I could request that slide to be advanced to shared services summary. Shared services reflects the performance and as well as the expectations and some of the difficulties encountered in hiring and filling vacancies. Check my notes here. There was another note here that some of these the slight reduction or the slight not slight but the reduction in expenses expected are also indicative of many of our outreach programs that were canceled due to the COVID pandemic, which we do believe with the start of new fiscal year, we'll return to normal business and our budgets will realign with our expected activities to get information out to our customers. With that, sirs, I will stand by for any questions.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes, can you go back to the previous slide?
Solid waste? Yes, Commissioner.
Okay. Unlike the other things in there where the capital expenditures budgeted were very small and very little had been done, this one has almost $500,000. And of that, we spent 11,000. Do we have something due that's going to come in the last 3 months to gobble up that 469,000 or what's going on here?
Chairman, Commissioner, I'd like to defer to Dominique Rodriguez. She may have what the timing is on this budget line item refers to a lot of their buildings and renovations of some of the buildings in solid waste. But I will defer to Ms. Dominique Rodriguez, which is the manager of rate economic analysis, may have some detail to that.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Johnson, my name is Dominique Rodriguez, Rate and Economic Analysis Manager. So the actuals are a lot less. We do have encumbrances right now. So we have open POs tied to building. That is correct. There are some that we split the cost. So we are expecting some to be paid, not the full amount of the budget. So some will probably roll over into the new fiscal year, but those are what the capital expenditures are tied to.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
I'm not sure it does. It still doesn't tell me whether, are we really anticipating a lot of that rolls over to next year? Or do we expect the bills to come in and more or less use the budgeted amount before the end of the fiscal year?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Johnson, so we some of the projects will be paid out this fiscal year, yes. It's not going to be the full amount of the budget, that is the 479, so a portion of it will be rolled over. We have them tied to the building here because we share the costs, and so those design and projects are still ongoing. But yes, there will be a portion of this. We would have to go through the POs, but I can get you that information to tell you which ones would be spent by the end of the fiscal year.
Yeah, I don't think you need to really get the information right now, but when you cover the end of the fiscal year, that's something that if there's a significant rollover, I think needs to be discussed.
Yes, sir. I will bring that for you when we do end of year.
Okay, go ahead.
Chairman, Commissioners, that concludes my presentation with regard to financial performance.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Delilah Walsh, Utilities Director for the record. And we are going to have our new staffing specialist, Diamond, present our HR update. And we did make the report shorter due to the work session, but this will be Diamond's first report. Diamond.
Thank you, Delilah. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Diamond Medina, Utilities Staffing Specialist. In regards to the Las Cruces Utilities Human Resource Activity Report, currently there are 11 positions being filled. They consist of both new hire and promotions, pending personnel action approval. To assist in efficient processing, all personnel correspondence are now being directed through my position. Prior to HR involvement, we do anticipate consistent communication between both departments to facilitate all HR issues. Our last update for today is that the Las Cruces Utilities Internship Program application deadline for this next year has closed. Interviews are to be held in the next 2 weeks. We anticipate filling 2 intern positions. I will now stand by for any questions. Thank you.
Hearing none, go ahead.
We'll move on to our board resolutions, and our first is, there we go, actually with John Morozek. John?
This is John Morozek, Deputy Director Wastewater. The resolution 19-20-047B for Evoca Water Technologies for the purchase of bioxide and bioxide plus for odor and corrosion control in the wastewater collection system.
I'm sorry, and I apologize, Mr. Chairman. I believe we've already approved this through the agenda, through the consent agenda, and we can move on to the next one.
Right, that's what I was getting ready to say.
Sorry about that, John. But thank
No
you
problem.
for being ready. Our next will actually be Jose Provencio when we get to his slide.
The resolution needs to be read into the record first.
Yeah, I'm getting ready to do that. The resolution for discussion today is resolution number 2021-125. Thank you. A resolution approving a sole source procurement for utility customer online access to account data services with Utility Hawk of Colorado Springs, Colorado, in the amount of $122,020 annually, starting fiscal year 2022, subject to approved budgets and annual renewals and approval in the amount of $10,679.61 for the remainder of fiscal year 2021.
Move to approve.
Commissioner Sword, and a second.
Second,
Okay, Ben Como seconds. Before we start discussion, this is a little bit scrambled on my text in front of me. So there's 2 pieces. There's next year's 122K, and there's also 10 grand for finishing out this year. Is that correct?
Chairman, Commissioners, this is Jose Provencio, Deputy Director of Business Services for the utility. That's correct. There's the work to implement the software portal was done prior to the end of this fiscal year, and with the approval of the resolution, we'll set up the ongoing agreement going forward. with the new fiscal year and going forward. So it's two pieces, the work that paid for the development and the testing that occurred in March, April, and May. That pays that work that was done between our staff and the Utility Hawk staff. And we will begin the new fiscal year with the annual payment for the software and licensing for customers to access all their account data on the Utility Hawk portal.
Thank you. Comments and questions? Hearing none, ready for a vote.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Sword, go ahead.
I was a little slow there. Yeah, we've had this Hawk service here. How do you call it? Hawk Utility Hawk, and I just wonder if it's worth it. I see the goals here of reducing customer side water losses. I thought our automatic meter readers was watching for that already, and that utilities would be warning people if they had a water loss. Am I getting that wrong?
Chairman Commissioner Sword, the utility portal unifies several other services in a consumer-friendly format that gets and provides several services. Number one, payment of utility services, through the credit card payment processor. The information that is presented for our customers is much more user and consumer focused rather than the more complicated and more intense information that we use here in the back office, monitoring and checking the consumption. Customer has the option to set all sorts of alerts, either consumption-based or dollar-based, on when they exceed those thresholds. So this portal unifies that, as well as bill presentment. If you want to get if a customer signs up to this portal and registers, they can look at their bill as it was generated going back a year or so. I don't know exactly what it is, but that is rapidly that's populated there, so customers can access all that information. So this portal unifies all those services into one area and no longer have to go to different places to get and process their information or pay their bill or get a copy of their previous bills.
Okay.
And if I could just emphasize the whole information here, this pushes out the capabilities and the options to the customer for them to be alerted of any issues based on their criteria in terms of consumption or dollar amount. And they are constantly, if they are registered under this portal, they're constantly being advised of what the utility information, utility consumption is comprised of.
Okay. You claim that it reduces the volume of calls from customers. Have you seen? I don't know, how long have we had this Utility Hawk working?
And when in Chairman and Commissioner Sword, this went live in April.
Ooh. Have you seen a reduction in the calls?
What I can attest to is the normal questions asking about the bill, copies for bills have reduced. We also have had very good feedback on the alerts that customers are getting right now in terms of their continuous flow for in regard to the water consumption. So it is a mixed bag in terms of the quality of service that is incredibly increased in terms of providing usable and pertinent information about their water bill, as well as a unified point to pay their bill, either by phone or online, all in one area.
Well, maybe somebody else is getting some use out of it. I just wasn't impressed. It's kind of a complicated looking graph that they had there. But if we could give it one good year and see just how well it works. Because I always paid my bills through the internet too, or the website. And I had a little trouble getting into this utility hawk. They want to change our passwords all the time. I hate that. But I just was not impressed with it. But if you all think it's going to be worthwhile, I'm willing to give it a try for a year and see if it, after a year, it really does it reaches the goals that you're outlining. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
Chairman, Commissioner, if I could address just one more question. Since its launch in April, we've had a little over 1,000 customers sign up and register to the system.
Thank you. This is William Little. This is exactly what we asked the Utilities Department to find and implement. And we certainly need to give it more than 1 month before we decide that it was a bad idea. Now, I have a number of people waiting to comment. First, Commissioner Hardy.
Yes, I had some of the same questions that Commissioner Sark had, but Sark got that partially answered. I was wondering how we could judge whether people are using it or not. So I sort of feel on the fence about this, whether it's really worth going forward to or not. But thank you. That's all I need.
Commissioner Carmichael.
Commissioner Carmichael, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, my questions pretty much got answered by that. Also, 1,000 customers so far out of whatever it is, 34,000 data base of customers that we have is certainly not enough to judge that on yet. So I'm certainly willing to see us go forward as we had discussed before, and let's see what happens over the coming months and year. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bencomo.
Thank you. Yes, I completely echo some of the sentiments about giving this a little bit more time, significantly more time to see if it works. You just have one more customer. I just registered in a matter of minutes and it was pretty easy. So I see it. I understand. I do see what Councilor Sorg is saying in regards to the graph. And I would appreciate, someone else had mentioned about gas usage in here. I think that would be a great addition. Also, Delilah or Joe, remind me, was it also in the works an app, or did I totally make that up?
Chairman Commissioner Bencomo, yes, if you recall, about 2 or 3 months ago, our business system analyst, Jeff Dillard, demonstrated it's not just a desktop application, it's also a mobile application app. So it's with you on your mobile device as well as your desktop. And to your note, it is both water and gas that's presented on this information on this portal. Right now, for many residential customers, gas is not an issue because you're down to minimal usage. However, recall, this is open to not just residential customers, to all customers. So there's a lot of initial reach out. One of our management analysts, James Stafford, is contacting and working with our parks department so that they have a better handle of what their parks water usage is and managing it. So it's a transition. We want to get this into the hands of the customer so that they have the information to understand what they're doing. If you're a Parks and Recs the water usage. If you're a commercial customer, your gas usage. So that has the potential of getting that information out near real time so that they understand what they're doing and what they're using.
Yeah, and my apologies, Joe. I did just find the natural gas tab on here, so you're totally right. And so is that app available already? Can I go look for it?
Chairman Commissioner Bencomo, yes, it is It is an active, it's an active mobile app.
Great.
Joe, I just want to, let me verify that with Jeff. I think the Utility Hawk website is in a mobile environment, but not in an actual app yet. So let us double check with Jeff and we'll get back to that because it does have the mobile website conversion. So you can use it on your mobile phone because I know mine, I just have it on my front screen as a website link, but let us double check with you. But I think it's still just in the website version in a mobile environment.
Gotcha. I do think that an app version would make all of this, I think a lot more people would sign up. It would make it more accessible and user friendly for sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Rhonda Diaz.
Wow. Hi, Rhonda Diaz, Water Conservation Program Coordinator. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was so wanting to raise my hand. I think it was telepathy that did it, not really me. But during this conversation, if you recall last work session in referencing the water conservation plan, this is going to be a huge tool for us to not only perform outreach for our community and show them how this can be a tool for them. You know, we haven't had any outreach opportunities because of COVID to introduce it to the community. But 1,000 just by word of mouth, if you will, is fantastic. But also the ability of the water conservation program to receive alerts and contact customers of abnormal use of water. To let them know, hey, you left the hose on last night. Oh, you've got a broken sprinkler head. Maybe you've got a toilet leak because you have continuous water at 2, 3, 4 a.m. in the morning when you're probably not using water. So definitely some time to see the results of this program would greatly be appreciated. Thank you.
Now, Commissioner Johnson.
Yes, if this system had been in effect a little more than a year ago, it would have saved me about $200. I own a couple of rentals and I pay the water and the wastewater and the trash on all of those. And for some reason, in the last month before one of the tenants moved out, they used between 10,000 and 20,000 gallons of water per day. And the only thing I can guess that happened is they turned the bathtub on all day long. So I went over there expecting to find a lake in there in the yard. There wasn't, and because of the pattern of use of buried, it wasn't a leak or anything. I think they were just mad at me and they're letting me know by making me have to pay a much higher utility bill for that month. So it would have saved me that, being able to do so. And I have to admit, I've been lazy and I haven't signed up yet.
Any more comments? Okay, this is William Little. I'm going to thank utilities for doing what we asked them to do. If there are no more comments, we're going to be ready for a vote on this resolution. Ready for a vote. Vice Chair Archuleta.
Aye.
Commissioner Bencomo.
Yes.
Commissioner Carmichael.
Yes.
Commissioner Hardy.
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Sword.
Yes.
And the chair, yes. Thank you all. Chair, Commissioner Walsh, I think that we're done with resolutions and it's now time for old business.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you for that. Again, for the record, Delilah Walsh, Utilities Director. I just want to update you. I really don't have an update for you yet on the status of our protests and for the Arctic freeze, gas charges and transmission penalties. We are still moving forward with our protests and complaints. I believe we're looking at having some time scheduled with Shell Energy at the end of this month, and hopefully we can get some of that resolved or start talking at the table. And we filed our protest with FERC on the EPNG penalty charges. So I don't have an update. We're still pursuing those options regarding bill disputes. And unfortunately, I just don't have anything new to give you on that status. I do want to let you know and invite you all, the APGA, the American Public Gas Association, of which we are a member, is having their national conference in New Mexico this year in Bernalillo, up north. And if you would like to attend, energy transition is going to be a big topic at the conference, as well as other issues faced by the natural gas industry. We would like to invite you if you would like to attend. It's July 25th through 28th. And because we're getting into travel times and the fact that there are limited hotel rooms, we've talked with APGA. They think they could find us at least 3 spaces for our commissioners if we need hotel spaces. It is a national conference, so obviously we didn't think anything was going to happen because of COVID, but everything's back on board now, and so we're sort of rushing to accommodate. So if you are interested, please check your calendars, and if you could let Alma know. I know this is very short notice, but by the end of this week, if you are interested in attending, so we can start processing that paperwork. So again, it will be in Bernalillo, July 25th through July 28th. And if you are interested in attending, please let Alma know as soon as possible or by the end of this week. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Adrian and Joe to talk about some contract extensions. As I mentioned at our last meeting, once we have a multi-year contract approved by the board, it's not necessary for us to get the extension renewals approved by the board because that is a condition of the contract. However, our staff will inform you when we initiate those extensions. So I believe Adrian's the first.
Mr. Chairman, Board, this is Adrian Woodmer, Assistant Utilities Director, and just informing you that the July 2019 resolution 1920 LCU 002 contract with the Maldigan, that one's kind of a tongue twister. Larry is his first name. Their firm for the Griggs Walnut for the insurance recovery and other legal workings for the joint Superfund project. So we're going ahead and doing year 2 of the extension, and we will go ahead and move forward with that. And they've actually been providing service to the joint Superfund project since November of 2012. So just wanted to let you know about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman, Commissioners, Jose Provencio, Deputy Director of Business Services. I want to update you and brief you on a contract extension. Contract 16-17-013, which is an electronic payment agreement with Paymentus. This has been extended to April 20th of the year 22. The Paymentus is the vendor that processes credit card and debit card payments for our customers. And that process, that portal, that facility, that link is now all bundled in together with the Utility Hawk portal. So that concludes that update.
Thank you, Joe. Our next old business report is from Carl Clark regarding the renaming of the water quality lab.
I'm not sure if you can see me. My camera doesn't show it as being on.
We see your jacket.
Got you.
There you are.
Very good. Thank you. Chairman, Commissioners, Carl Clark, Deputy Director, Environmental and Technical Support. Basically, we're getting the opportunity now because of the COVID restrictions being lifted to have this dedication of the water quality lab to the Jorge A. Garcia Water Quality Lab. We anticipate having this dedication on July 9th. We believe we're going to have it at 9 a.m. in the morning when it's cool. And Alma will be working with you all to put this on your calendars and get you all to show up over there to this dedication and be with Dr. Garcia when we dedicate the naming of the building to him.
Thank you.
Carl.
That's the Friday after our next meeting.
That is correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that. That concludes our old business and we can move on to new business.
Please do.
Mr. Chairman, again, for the record, Delilah Walsh, Utilities Director. We had a really interesting opportunity last Friday to have a discussion, a recorded Zoom meeting we did with Mr. Ken Needham and with Dr. Garcia. And I don't know if you know, but Mr. Needham was our utilities director for several years prior to Dr. Garcia. He actually worked with Dr. Garcia for quite some time. So we had a really great discussion about the history of the utility and some of the initiatives that he had put in place and they had put in place early on. And so we've got that Zoom discussion. Alma will share the link with you if you're interested in perusing it. We also have an article that will be out tomorrow in the Las Cruces Bulletin that sort of talks about what we discussed. And I found it as a new director, especially not having the same historical knowledge of the utility as Dr. Garcia did or many of our other deputy directors, really interesting on some of our initiatives and what we started regarding our water rights and Texas being New Mexico being very proactive in water law and water issues in the entire Southwest, as well as creation of the South Central Solid Waste Authority and making those efforts to make a looped and redundant water system at the utility. So it was a really great opportunity. And I thank both Mr. Needham and Dr. Garcia for sitting down with us. And Alma will share that link with you if you'd like to review the Zoom video. The only last thing I have under new business is just a reminder that we will have one more work session. I know it's been months and months of work sessions, but we've got a lot of work to do here regarding the 10-year water plan work session. And Adrian, I don't know if you want to say a little bit more about that.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Adrian Widmer, Assistant Utilities Director. We're just waiting for the last two items that you all had requested from the consultant, and they're expecting to get those in before the end of the month so that we can provide that to you. And so we will provide you all of their documentation all together so that when we have this work session, you'll have it all together. And then that way they'll be able to review all of it with you and hopefully give you time then to go back and digest it. So we're looking forward to it. Thank you.
With that, Mr. Chair, that's it for new business on staff side.
Okay, thank you. And you will calendar that work session for July 8th. About what time?
We anticipate 2 o'clock would be sufficient.
Thank you. Next order of business is board's general discussion. Any member of the board have anything to contribute? Commissioner Johnson.
Yes, last time we met, we brought up the question about malware and data lockups and are we protected against that? I read an interesting article recently about something called jackware. It turns out that not only is your computer system at risk, but the little mini computers you have in many of your devices, like the electronic control unit in your car, can be hijacked, and suddenly your brakes won't work. You can't stop going, and a number of different things can be made to overheat and explode. And I'm just hopeful that the IT folks that look at these sort of threats also are aware of this jackware and the fact that it can be a lot more dangerous than just the malware. But if you're interested, Yahoo has a very interesting article on that that came out a couple of days ago, and it's called Jackware, all one word.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. It might be a good idea, again, Delilah Walsh for the record, for us to follow up with just a small report to you from IT and our BSAs of how we're protected. And I know the city council, actually, one of the councilors brought it up at the last meeting, asking what we're doing to protect ourselves. So I think it might be a good idea for us just to give you a short report.
Yeah, particularly if they can include also looking at Jackware, which seems to be a new threat, but it's what the US used to shut down the Iranian nuclear program in 2016, which caused all of their centrifuges to overheat and break down.
Okay, thank you. Any other board member? Okay, seeing no other contributions, I'm ready to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
First,
Okay.
could I
Commissioner
ask a
Johnson.
question? Are we going to meet in person next month then?
Yes,
Okay.
that's my concluding remark, is that next month, in accordance with the precedent established by the city council, we will be meeting in person here in the utilities building. Utilities staff will orchestrate and geometrize us so that we're the proper distance from one another, if it still takes that. But we will look forward to seeing everyone here at utilities for the work session at 2 o'clock on July 8th. And now, do I have a second to adjourn?
Carmichael, second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.